Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and also my planty home. I was a Hoya lover for a few years there in my plant keeping journey, and I went hard into the Hoya collecting. There was a point I had over 150 different varieties in my collection. If you'd like to watch the video where I spoke about all the different varieties I have, I will have it linked. For as quickly as I fell in love with Hoya, equally quickly I fell out of love with Hoya. And here are the main reasons why I've kind of steered away from Hoya collecting. Number one, I think I need to mention, with Hoyas, you really often see them sold as single nodes, which can get really expensive. It does take a really long time for those size plants to get to a point where I feel like they actually look really good. Like usually they just look like a little stick poking out of the soil with like maybe a couple of leaves. And to me, that just like doesn't look good. It takes a long time to get to a point where I actually fall in love with the plants. I mean, a lot of the ones in my collection I bought really small like that, and they're now to a point where I'm starting to enjoy them and like really see the beauty in them, but it took a super long time to get there. The market of Hoyas is just a little bit crazy in my opinion. Reason number two, mealybugs love them. I'm talking root mealies, you know, the ones that you see on the leaves, they love them. And especially in larger plants, it's really easy for mealybugs to hide in them. I haven't really had too many other pest issues with my Hoyas, but definitely mealybugs has been a recurring dilemma I've had to deal with, and not even just a couple of varieties here and there. It's been an issue with all of my Hoya. So maybe it's because of where I've bought these plants. Maybe they were already contaminated. Maybe I brought one into my collection that was contaminated and it's just been a freaking nightmare to get rid of them. But this has been a struggle, like a near constant struggle. It also, in my opinion, is a lot more difficult of a process to get rid of, because where Hoyas have like the thicker, plumper, water storing leaves, you know, they're very succulent plants where they don't necessarily need to be watered as often. It's a lot slower of a process to get rid of mealies, even using things like systemic, because with not having to water them as often, the roots aren't taking up as much of that systemic to take care of the problem. That is something that has been a struggle for me, and I just realized that with 150 Hoya plants, when I had an outbreak, it wasn't something I was able to get under control very easily, so I downsized my collection. I maybe have like 25, well maybe even like 15 or 20, if that, Hoyas in my collection at this point, because I've realized that that's what I can manage and that's what I can keep in my collection pest free and stay on top of. Reason number three is for design purposes. And okay, I'm not like a master decorator or interior decorator. I don't know anything about that, but I know what I like. In my opinion, Hoyas just don't really look that good in my home setup. I do have most of my Hoyas downstairs in my grow tent and in my plant room that are more of my collecting rooms. Those are the rooms where I keep plants that I don't necessarily love, like up here. I guess what I'm getting at is they never really look like they fit into the spots I'm putting them in. When I'm bringing plants into my upstairs space, it's because I feel like this plant looks like it belongs here. It looks like it's been living in this spot for maybe a long time and like grown in, you know, and Hoyas just never really do that for me. I have seen really incredible Hoya collections in people's homes, but for me, it's just not something I was ever really able to make look good. It just takes a lot more effort or a lot more mindful like potting and setup situating to get them to look really good in a spot, to really draw the eye. I guess that's also another thing. I like when my plants like draw my eye to them, and Hoyas were never really that for me when I had them intermingled with the rest of my plants. That's something that I wasn't really getting out of my Hoyas up here. They just kind of blended into the space. And I don't know, they really look good with like trellises and stuff, but I don't really love the look of trellises, which is why they don't really fit into my design ideas. Number four, kind of, I guess this one kind of goes along with the last one, but a lot of them throw out really long vines, and they're just empty vines for a long time usually, that kind of reach and hang weirdly before they end up forming leaves. So in the beginning, I actually made dire mistake and cut a whole bunch of these off because I thought that they were just like sad vines, but no, Hoyas just grow, a lot of Hoyas just grow like that. They'll just throw out really long vines, grab onto something, then it'll start putting out leaves, and that can be a really annoying process. And it goes back to the they don't really look very good thing. They don't really ever look like they've been living there for a long time because these long vines can kind of grow and reach crazily. I just don't really like those. Reason number 5, Hoya plants are so messy. This is not something I had any idea about before I kept these for a prolonged period of time. Like over the course of maybe, I think like my 3rd year keeping Hoyas is when I realized how messy they really are. And a big reason for this, they bloom. And I know that sounds crazy. The blooms, for as beautiful as they are equally messy because they leak sap. And that's not something I ever felt like I had heard about very much. So yeah, when I had my 150 Hoya varieties in my collection and things started to bloom, it was like there was sap freaking everywhere. It got to a point where like if my Hoyas that had previously bloomed again or threw out like several peduncles at once, I would cut the peduncles off before they could even open because the sap was leaking freaking everywhere. As long as you're not treating the plant with anything weird like systemic or anything like that, you can actually taste the sap, which I have done in the past. So that's kind of an experience. And then when the blooms dry up, they do all fall off. They'll throw out like a whole bunch of blooms at one time. All of those will dry up and fall off and they get stuck in the sap and it's just a whole mess. I had to cut back because it was a mess that I could not keep up on. And it just got worse and worse over time. Like my grow tent was so sticky and sappy from all of my Hoya blooms that I didn't even want to be down there because everything was sticky. If I touched a surface, it was sticky with Hoya sap, which that's probably dramatic. It probably wasn't really that bad, but it felt like it at the time. So it made me really not even enjoy my Hoyas because that's just an extra step to take in the plant keeping care schedule that took up a lot of time. Another way they're messy is actually taking cuttings from the plants themselves. They leak this white sap that is like, especially if it gets on your skin, it's the hardest sap to remove. You really have to scrub it to get it off. I don't know how or why. Also, if you have sensitive skin, I think it is something that can be irritating. So be really careful when you're taking those cuttings, but it is so freaking messy and those suckers drip forever. They drip for so long. It does get messy fast, really messy, really fast. It is also hard for me to bring my Hoya plants upstairs and implement them into my collection because Hoya plants, they generally need really high light and I just don't have that much light in my upstairs. So I try to keep them around my grow lights. I keep most of that downstairs in my grow tent. But that is just something to consider. So maybe if you're somebody that has like super huge south facing windows that get amazing high direct light, your Hoyas will love that. My house really doesn't have great natural lighting, honestly. I kind of miss my old house for this reason because I used to have like a floor to ceiling windows that got amazing light and I could keep a lot of Hoyas, and then I moved here and it just didn't work. So I gotta say, for me, it was really easy to neglect my Hoyas because they are such tolerant plants, which really is a good thing, but it's also kind of a bad thing in my case because I took it to the extreme. If I only have time to water one plant, it's going to be like my Syngonium, my peace lily, you know, those really thirsty plants, and not a Hoya. So I did find myself neglecting my Hoyas a lot because I knew they could handle a lot. It just was like a slippery slope for me where in my mind I'm like, okay, they can dry out a lot, they can store a lot of water in their leaves, it's okay if I don't water it this week, and then like weeks at a time would go by and I wouldn't water them. So they were a really easy plant to neglect in a very, very large plant collection. And that is a little bit extreme, but that's my personal experience. They are pretty easy to come back from that neglect, but also easy to like snowball into bigger and bigger issues, which, you know, if a plant isn't being watered enough, it's of course going to get pests more because it's a weak plant. Of course, a pest is going to take advantage of that. Kind of on that, I guess we'll call this point number 6. It does take kind of a long time for them to bloom, especially if you're buying them as those really small little single node rooted cuttings that we talked about earlier. It will take like like years for that sucker to bloom probably. Me personally, it seems like the 3-ish year mark is when they start throwing out blooms, and it can be hard to be patient for that. So I did find myself getting a little bit annoyed with my Hoyas that weren't blooming, because I was like, I've been taking care of this so consistently and I know I've been taking care of it well for all this time. Why isn't it blooming? I do think I have a few little tricks up my sleeve to help force a bloom a little bit now. So if you're interested in seeing a video about that, let me know. I'd be totally down. Maybe you don't want your Hoyas to bloom because I talked about how messy they are, but it is a really, really fun part of Hoyas. My Hoya rotundiflora just bloomed for the first time and it was so exciting. But I've been caring for this plant for like 2-3 years-ish now. So it did take a long time for it to finally bloom and for my efforts to, at long last, pay off. Another thing on the bloom topic that I don't like is sometimes the blooms smell terrible. So specifically, I'm talking about, what one was it? Is it species Affinis Bertoniae? It smells like butterscotch or like almost like cat pee. Fragrant is the word I'm looking for. They are very fragrant. They are so fragrant, whether that smell is good or bad. If you walk into a room with a Hoya bloom, like chances are you're going to be able to smell it. And that Hoya Bert, as much as I loved the plant itself and even the blooms I thought were really pretty, it was a plant I was willing to deal with the messy blooms. I just got to a point where I couldn't handle the smell anymore because it really had like an essence of cat pee. And I did not like it. I know a lot of people love the smell of that one, so maybe it's just a me issue, but I didn't like it. If one of my Hoya blooms and I don't like the smell of it, I'm getting rid of it, because once a Hoya blooms once, it's going to keep blooming and the blooms just get more and more prolific. It throws out more and more peduncles over time and it'll keep reblooming from those peduncles. So it's really easy for it to get out of hand. Okay, we're kind of switching gears here. I've been kind of shitting on Hoyas so much. So I maybe should talk about a few things that I do like about them, because yeah, there are good things about Hoyas too. Outside of blooms, they can be really, really low maintenance because the leaves are so thick and juicy and succulent. They don't need watered as frequently, so they're very easy to keep up on. They're one of the few plant genuses in my collection that I actually spray the foliage of consistently. And I do spray them with a nutrient water or like liquid fertilizer because they do absorb nutrients through their leaves and their stems. And this is kind of fun for me to have different little things like that to do in my plant keeping. Like sometimes I get bored of just watering my plants, so it's nice to have some Hoyas in my collection that if I'm sick of watering my plants, I can grab my sprayer and just give them a quick spray down. I don't know what it is. It's just such a satisfying, like kind of cathartic thing for me to be able to switch up the gears a little bit like that. I think that's really fun. And yeah, the varieties that I have that I love the look of and I do feel like are growing in a way that I like, I love them. The very first Hoya I ever got was a Hoya obovata. This is one that definitely stands out. Those big leaves really catch an eye, you know? Ooh, those big leaves. What else do I love? I do also love the blooms. I know I kind of shit talked them earlier, but blooms do actually last a really long time on these, which is, I kind of dislike when a plant blooms and I can only enjoy it for like 1 second before it wilts and dies, but Hoya ones do stick around for a really long time, so it's fun. Those are all the reasons I dislike Hoya. I would love to hear what reasons you have for not really liking Hoya, or even if you're a Hoya collector, what are the downfalls? Please share a comment because it's so helpful. It is really, really helpful. I feel like the more information we can have on different plant genuses and plant varieties, the better prepared we'll be to introduce those into our collections, or not introduce those into our collections, like dependent on that. So the more information we have, the better. And be sure to thumbs up or thumbs down this video to let me know what you thought of it. I will see you next time.